Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Have you ever noticed how an activity that, promises the ultimate freedom often leads to pretty consistent failure for so many people, even like highly accomplished people? We're talking about trading, of course. And it turns out the biggest challenges, well, they aren't really out there in the market chaos itself, but deep inside our own minds. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some excerpts from The Lure and Dangers of Trading. It's a really fascinating source, I think, that offers a truly unique perspective on why so few actually become successful traders.
Yeah, it really does. And what's particularly interesting, what the book points out, is that while many might think the draw is, action or that euphoria kick, those are actually seen as problematic. The real underlying attraction, it argues, is way more fundamental. It's this idea of unlimited freedom of creative expression, something, most of us don't really get much of in our regular lives.
Right. So, our mission today is to try and understand how this incredibly appealing freedom actually becomes a kind of psychological minefield. We'll hopefully uncover some surprising truths about, well, human nature and the kind of pretty profound mental adjustments we might need to make, not just for trading maybe, but maybe for navigating life itself. Okay, so when we talk about this unlimited freedom, specifically in the trading world, what does that actually look like? How does it, show up?
Well, the author explains it pretty clearly. In trading, you are essentially the one making almost all the rules. There are very, very few external restrictions, which means the possibilities for how you express your trading ideas, your strategy, they're virtually limitless. The source gives this incredible example, actually, combining, say, bond futures, bond options, and cash bond markets. That alone could yield over 8 billion possible spread combinations. 8 billion.
Wow.
And that's before you even start thinking about timing.
That's a staggering amount of freedom, almost overwhelming. But here's the really interesting part, the puzzle. If there's so much freedom, why would that consistently lead to failure for so many people? What's the paradox there?
That's the absolute core of the argument. It's that unlimited possibilities, coupled with the unlimited freedom to take advantage of those possibilities, present the individual with unique and specialized psychological challenges.
Mm.
And these are challenges that, frankly, very few people are properly equipped to handle, or sometimes not even really aware that they are challenges.
That's a crucial distinction, isn't it? So it's not just about being smart enough or knowing the market inside out. It's more about needing to make these significant mental adjustments to build some kind of internal mental structure. Is that the idea?
Precisely. That internal structure is absolutely essential. It's what provides the necessary balance, between that total freedom to do anything and the very real potential for serious financial and psychological damage.
Mm.
And the book really emphasizes that building this mental structure is tough, especially when it kind of clashes with what we already believe about the world, how things work, beliefs that often got cemented way back in our earliest experiences. And, if you connect this to the bigger picture, just think about it for a second. All of us were born into an existing social environment, right? And that environment, it comes preloaded with structures, rules, restrictions, boundaries, shared beliefs. These quickly become a sort of code of behavior that limits the ways in which individuals within that social structure can or cannot express themselves.
Right. It sounds like there's this natural, almost unavoidable conflict baked right in from the start.
Mhm.
Society needs order, but we as individuals have this innate drive for self-expression.
That's a really good way to put it. A built-in tension. The source points to curiosity as this universal thing in every child. An inner directed force, it calls it. It naturally compels them to explore, to learn. And then there are these natural attractions, things we just feel a deep, passionate interest in, which the author believes come from the deepest level of our being, at the level of our true identity.
Okay, so what happens then from this perspective when those deepest natural attractions, that innate curiosity, run smack into what our social environment demands or expects?
Well, the source gives a pretty relatable example. Imagine a child born into a family of, say, super competitive athletes. Everyone's focused on sports. But this child's true passionate interest is actually in classical music. They might feel this immense pressure to conform, to fit in, even if pursuing sports doesn't feel like who you are deep down.
Yeah, and the book really drives this home with that scenario we can probably all picture. A toddler, just driven by pure curiosity, reaches for a delicate vase on the coffee table. And bam, the immediate firm response is, no, don't touch that.
Exactly. That single interaction, repeated countless times in different ways, creates an upset, an imbalance, the book calls it, between our inner needs and the external world. When our desires get denied like that, we experience emotional pain. Because those unmet needs, they create a kind of mental vacuum that just longs to be filled. It reminds me of the philosopher Spinoza, who observed centuries ago, nature abhors a vacuum, and it seems our minds kind of do too.
It's really quite striking. The source estimate that by the time we hit 18, we've probably heard thousands of these denied impulses.
hmm
Things like, you can't do that, or no, you have to do it this way. Thousands.
Yeah, thousands. And these denied impulses, if they aren't somehow reconciled, maybe processed through emotion at the time, like a child having a good cry and moving on, they can just pile up. The source suggests they accumulate and usually end up manifesting themselves in any number of addictive and compulsive behavior patterns. Think of them like, I don't know, unresolved emotional static, subtly driving how we act. Like an addiction to attention might actually stem from feeling deprived of it way back in childhood.
And these unreconciled impulses, these unresolved things, the book argues, directly mess with our ability to stay focused and take a disciplined, consistent approach to our trading. It's like this internal noise that constantly distracts us.
That's absolutely the connection it makes. Now, contrast that social environment with the trading environment. Trading is unique because, unlike society, the market doesn't provide these ready-made rules or boundaries to guide how we behave. It's inherently boundaryless, almost like a stream that is in constant motion, as the book puts it, no clear edges.
So no set beginnings, middles, or endings like,
Mm.
well, like almost every other activity we do. Sports, school projects, even meals. How does that stack up against something like, say, blackjack, which also involves risk and money?
It's fundamentally different. In gambling games like blackjack, the rules themselves force you to decide in advance what your risk is. And crucially, each game, each hand, has a formal ending. If you're losing, you have to make a very conscious decision to put more money down and keep playing. There are external guardrails.
Okay. But trading doesn't have those built-in stops.
Yeah.
Those external guardrails just aren't there.
Not really, no. Profoundly different. In trading, no one, except yourself, is going to force you to decide in advance what your risk is. There's no dealer telling you no more bets. So without that self-imposed structure, you can easily become what the author calls a passive loser. The market itself will not take you out of a trade. You can just sit there, ignoring a losing position as it gets worse and worse. And the market will take everything you own and more if you let it.
Wow. That sounds exactly like what the source describes as being both a gift and a curse, doesn't it? The gift is complete control of everything we do, but the curse is having no external rules or boundaries to guide or structure our behavior. It puts the entire burden, all of it, squarely on your own shoulders.
100%. It's total freedom, but also total responsibility.
Okay, so this boundaryless environment, this immense freedom, it sounds great on paper, but as the source points out, it creates these really specific psychological traps for traders. Let's maybe dig into the 4 major problems it identifies, starting with a kind of surprising one: our own resistance, our lack of willingness to create rules for ourselves.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But there's often this natural, sometimes very subtle resistance inside us to actually creating rules for ourselves. And this is the core paradox the book highlights. The very reason we are attracted to trading in the first place, the unlimited freedom of creative expression, is the same reason we feel a natural resistance to creating the kinds of rules and boundaries that can appropriately guide our behavior. I mean, think about it. We've spent maybe our whole lives trying to break free from rules imposed on us by others.
Right. Parents, teachers, bosses.
Exactly. And then suddenly in trading, we realize we need rules, but this time we have to be the ones to make them and enforce them. And there's a part of us that just rebels against that.
Okay, so that's a big hurdle, just resisting the idea of setting up your own structure. But even if you manage that, the source points out another really insidious challenge: the failure to take responsibility for your actual trading outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. Trading is described as this exercise in pure, unencumbered personal choice with an immediate outcome. You click the button, something happens right away. But the reality is, many traders just aren't ready, or maybe not willing, to accept full personal responsibility for those outcomes, both the wins and the losses. And this often leads to what gets called random trading, trades that are poorly planned, or maybe not planned at all, impulsive decisions. Because it's incredibly easy psychologically to take credit for the trades that turn out to our liking.
Oh yeah, that was all me, my genius insight.
Right. But then when a trade goes bad, it's suddenly, oh, it's bad market conditions, or my broker messed up, or I got bad advice. Anything but acknowledging that each trade I chose to make had a probable outcome, and sometimes that outcome is a loss.
That definitely makes a lot of psychological sense. What about the next one the source mentions, the addiction to random rewards? That sounds, well, also incredibly human, but maybe less obvious.
It is, and it's powerful. The book actually references some classic studies done on the psychological effects of random rewards on monkeys.
Hmm.
And what they found was really fascinating. Monkeys who got a reward every time they did a task, a consistent schedule, well, they stopped doing the task pretty quickly when the reward stopped. Makes sense.
Okay.
But if the rewards were random right from the start, sometimes they got one, sometimes they didn't, unpredictably, those monkeys keep on doing the task, even without being rewarded for doing it. Sometimes, apparently, indefinitely.
Wow. Like playing a slot machine.
Exactly like that. And we humans, we are just as susceptible, maybe even more so, to this exact same psychological trap. It could be due to, those euphoria-inducing chemicals our brains release when we get an unexpected pleasant surprise. That random win feels so good. But this addiction, this pull towards the random reward, can create a kind of choicelessness.
Yeah.
It hijacks our focus, pulling it away from really vital things like consistently managing risk.
Okay, that's a scary one. And finally, the source brings up this contrast between external versus internal control. This feels like it could really trip up a lot of people, especially those who are maybe very successful in other parts of their life.
Absolutely. This is a huge one. Think about it. Our whole social upbringing, generally speaking, teaches us to fulfill our needs and get what we want by trying to control and manipulate our external environment. Influencing other people, changing situations to suit us. That's how we learn to operate.
Standard operating procedure for most of life.
Yeah. Right. But the market, the author calls it a psychological wilderness. It does not know, care, or respond to anything that is important to us. It's completely indifferent. And this is precisely why so many highly successful individuals, doctors, lawyers, business owners, often fail miserably at trading. They're proven methods of external manipulation, the things that made them successful elsewhere.
They just don't work here.
They just don't work. The market doesn't care about your credentials or your persuasive arguments. The solution, the source suggests, isn't to try harder to control the uncontrollable market. It's to learn to control ourselves, our perception of the market, our interpretation of the information, and crucially, our own behavior in response to it, shifting the locus of control inward.
Wow. Okay, this whole deep dive into the psychology of trading, it really hammers home that the biggest hurdles, they aren't really in the external market data or charts at all, are they? They're firmly planted in the internal landscape of our own minds. It's actually a pretty powerful revelation when you think about it that way.
It really is. And building that internal mental structure we talked about, with those self-imposed rules, taking genuine personal responsibility, having a keen awareness of our own psychological biases, and making that fundamental shift from seeking external control to mastering internal control. That really seems to be utterly essential for achieving any kind of consistency, whether it's in trading or, quite frankly, any other endeavor in life that offers that kind of profound freedom and requires self-direction.
Okay, so here's maybe a final provocative thought for you listening to mull over. If true freedom, real freedom, comes not just from an absence of rules, but maybe from the conscious creation of rules that actually serve your highest self, your goals.
Yeah.
What boundaryless areas of your own life outside of trading might really benefit from building that kind of internal architecture? What could you potentially achieve if you built your own personal framework for freedom in those areas? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.